Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I am joined by Todd Bailey, the CEO of Trace here in Vermont. Todd, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. I'm excited about it. Look forward to talking about all things track and trace.
Yeah, this is one of the first interviews where I forgot to call you first, and we met at Zen Barn the other night, and I thought I had some notes, but we're going to kind of freeball this one. But it was honestly, you caught me sort of pleasantly off guard there with some of our conversations. You know, sometimes when I approach people, I'm not sure if we're going to have anything to talk about, but I thought you made some excellent points. And before we get into any of your business stuff, would you share your 5-minute life story with us, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I grew up in South Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. So I'm a long-suffering Philadelphia sports fan, and moved up to Vermont in 1993 originally. Met my wife up here. We lived here for a long time, moved around, lived a little bit in Burlington, Montpelier, Heinsberg, back to Burlington. Then we moved back down to Philadelphia, actually, where she is a palliative care nurse practitioner and was working at the University of Pennsylvania. And I was working primarily on national cannabis policy. That was with my firm, Leonine Public Affairs in Montpelier. We do national public relations and government affairs. I ran the government affairs team for quite some time at the firm. And, then COVID hit and everything changes. And so we moved from Philadelphia back to Vermont. I left Leonine and took over as the CEO of Trace. And so that's where I've been since the beginning of 2022. And really focused on all things Vermont, living here, working here, trying to get situated for the upcoming rec market, which I think everybody is obviously really excited about in Vermont. I think we all thought that it was going to come maybe 2 or 3, 4 years ago. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and now we're finally here. And I think everybody's really excited about it and trying to work through all of these issues that are popping up.
But yeah, somehow New Jersey beat us to the punch here.
Yeah, right. No kidding. I'm glad I grew up in New Jersey. It's a punching bag. I would never go back and live there. But there were some good things. There are some good things, actually. That's really it. Got 2 giant dogs that will probably bother us a little bit during this interview that I'll have to take care of. But
I love that.
Super easy.
That's fine. Yeah, I have a 5-pound dog, and sometimes he jumps on me when I'm doing interviews.
Well, ours are 140-pound Great Dane and 160-pound Irish Wolfhound. So, 100 pounds of dog.
Yeah, I love Wolfhounds.
Yeah,
cool.
Great.
So Todd, tell us. I was hoping you would maybe sort of walk us through a little bit of the history of sort of track and trace programs, and then sort of how you came up with the idea for Trace, or however you guys formulated that concept.
Yeah. So let me give you just like a quick overview of Trace as well. Trace is a Vermont company founded by 2 Vermonters, Josh Decatur and Paul Intelak. They really came with a very specific but diverse background and perspective on how to build a better tracking solution. Josh was a longtime farmer and really understood the cannabis industry, worked on farms, worked on cultivation, and really could see firsthand what the problems were with the existing track and trace solutions that were available to cultivators. And so he said, this can be done better. Paul has a wonderful technical background. He's an expert in blockchain. Trace is as an expert in blockchain. We have a tracking solution that is blockchain based, but also a traditional tracking solution as well. And Paul kind of put his technical expertise together with Josh's cannabis expertise and came up with the company Trace, which started roughly 3.5 years ago. I was introduced to them very early on as a startup and assisted with the operation from a government affairs and public relations perspective. So I've also been with them since day 1, essentially, not day 0. That's Josh and Paul, who are the co-founders of the company. And that's how we got to where we are today, and why we feel like what needs to happen in the industry is a revolution around track and trace solutions, because what exists now is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly onerous. It has no flexibility. The legacy providers really limit what can be done by cultivators, especially when you think about what happens typically within the government space is they contract with a track and trace solution as required by every state's law. And then that track and trace solution mandates which solution the cultivators have to use as well, limiting those options, limiting the businesses to be able to decide what's best for their business is going to be most productive. And that's really where Trace comes in and what we were trying to solve.
Now, who is your competition here, Todd?
Yeah, so our biggest competition are probably the three companies that everybody knows: BioTrack THC, MJ Freeway, and then Metric. Metric is the one that most people tend to focus on. They have the most contracts with state government for track and trace solutions. All of those solutions are similar. You're not exactly the same, but they really are kind of all in the same ballpark, if you will.
So could you tell us a little, maybe the basics of how some of those systems work?
Sure. So typically what's happened in the early stages of the cannabis industry, when states pass a rec or a medical program, they require seed to sale tracking. And the seed to sale tracking that's done is on a per plant basis, right? So if you're in one of the early stage states or even these middle stage states, you are tracking every plant that you grow. And the way that the metric system works is that you're required to put an RFID tag on each plant. So that's not only an expensive proposition for farmers, especially small farmers, it's also onerous and very labor intensive to take the time to have to put these tags on every plant. Metric charges different rates for the tags, depending on the size of your operation, which state you're in. All of those things are really, I'll leave that to them. And
sure,
it can vary slightly from what
sure.
I hear.
And I'd love to know the details of that later, but I don't want to put you on the spot to like lay out their whole just the basics, you know. The RFID tracking was super interesting. It was something I had never heard of before I started covering this story, really.
Yeah, and it was one of the reasons that we developed Trace in the way that we did. Our original concept was very blockchain based, heavily blockchain based. Our company has several patents in the blockchain space because of the innovative thinking that Paul brings to the table. It's very unique solutions to how we transfer data and how we secure data. And you know, what we're trying to do is to create a solution that has more flexibility, that gives the cultivators the ability to have less labor intensive practices while still meeting all of the regulatory requirements that each individual state is placing on cultivators for all of the reasons that we understand. And to try to limit the amount of product that's going into the black market, going over state lines illegally, safety, precaution. There are some good reasons, there are some bad reasons. I think we'll always be a regulated industry. But our hope is that what we see is a diminishment of those regulations, and that really fits what our system is set up to do. We don't use RFID tags, so there's no extra equipment to buy. You can print QR codes right at your home or office, and that's the only extra expense you'll ever have. But once you have the printer, you have it until it breaks on you. And then our system is flexible in the sense that if the state ultimately decides that they're going to require per plant tracking, we can track per plant, but we can also track by batch, however that is defined. Maybe it's by row, by
sort of like they do with alcohol.
Exactly. Yep. So that's where our unique platform and technical development comes into play, because we've created a system that will allow for the cultivator to be flexible, allows the regulator to be flexible. It says the small farmers, we're going to try to keep your expenses down, and we're going to try to make it as easy as possible on you as we can, while still getting the data that we need to make sure that our system is working properly and that everybody is safe in the product that they're receiving once they go to the retail front and purchase whatever it is that they want to purchase.
Now, let me ask you this, Todd. What would the ramifications be if we just didn't do any track and trace?
So it's interesting. I think, you know what, one of the big things where I think there's actually a benefit to track and trace, it keeps some of the larger operations that are out of state from sending product in state, right? So how big of a problem that will be, maybe it's not big enough to even be worried about. Maybe it's a big problem that we should really be worried about. But if we think about what's going on in, say, New York, right, where there's going to be enormous grow operations that are going to be happening, there would be little way for us to prevent some of that product from crossing state lines and being sold
Sure.
in the state of Vermont. And that would depress the price that our cultivators are getting. It would depress the product and the quality of the product that the consumers were getting and that people have come to expect of a Vermont product. But I also think that you potentially run the risk of reducing safety measures that I think are going to be really important in the early stages of the industry. This is not unique to cannabis.
Such
Right?
as safety
Well,
measures, such as.
well, so if a product is tainted and it's unsafe, and there are very rare instances of this occurring thus far in the cannabis industry, but there have been times where individuals in, I believe it was Washington, maybe it was Oregon, who have died from using a tainted cannabis product. It was a medical product. They were already ill. It's not like they were a healthy young individual just looking to go enjoy an experience in
Sure.
smoking some
And
flower.
I've seen some of these lawsuits, like Curaleaf had a big
Yep.
recall for using unapproved additives in their vape
Mhm.
cartridges and stuff like that.
Yep. And so I think, especially when we think about Vermont and the consumers here, and kind of our ethic around high quality, often organic, if not organic, still natural. We don't want to use a lot of pesticides or herbicides. We want to do things a certain way with all of our agricultural practices. And so having these safety precautions in place for any cannabis product is not different than alcohol or even just food, right? So we see every year there's always some type of outbreak with spinach or some other leafy green where people are worried about how they're getting sick.
Romaine lettuce or something.
Exactly. And we have to have a way to track that back for consumer protection so that we can identify the source of the problem, and make sure that other consumers aren't getting sick or worse, dying from ingesting a toxic product.
Sure, absolutely. And I think as a customer, uh, whatever. I know where I get my herb from, so I don't
Yeah.
really care. Although I do like to see that sort of like, as sort of like nostalgia, even maybe to see the testing results, to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
what's in there. Like, even though I know where my shit's coming from, to see those results is kind of comforting as a consumer, at least. And I wanted to back you up a little here about the RFID tags here. So the way that works is that whenever you move a plant, even when you're moving it from like veg to a flower room, that plant has to be scanned, right? And
Correct.
then that goes into a database somewhere. So if you have 1,000 plants, every time you move them to the flower room, you got to scan 1,000 tags and put that into your software. Is that sort
That's
of
correct.
correct?
That's correct. And so, and some of that depends on what the individual states' regulations are, right? Like, so we're still waiting for the CCB to release all of the track and trace regulations for the state of Vermont. But I think if you look at all of the other states and what they've done, you can take a reasonable guess of what the expectations will be for cultivators, manufacturers primarily, and then testing. The track and trace regulations really diminish pretty significantly once you get into extraction and retail, right? Retail is going to be mostly inventory and point of sale, and that's how they're going to track the product. But it's by the time it gets to them, it's a finished product, so there's not really much to track other than what's going on to
Sure.
their shelves. Yeah, so each step of the process along the supply chain, you need to scan and update your data and then provide that data to the state of Vermont. I mean, the most obvious examples are how many plants do you have? How many clones did you use? How many seeds did you plant? And then when you're harvesting and weighing, what is the weight? So they want to know, they want to keep a general idea around how much, what are your yields and what are you producing? And year over year, are you consistent in what you're producing? And it does become onerous for a cultivator to have to do that extra step. And especially when you're using an RFID tag, which requires all of that extra equipment to go along with it as well. Whereas with the QR code system, pretty much not everyone has a smartphone at this point that can read a QR code.
So we're talking about the difference between RFID tags and like a sticker that you would put on your pot.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, there's been two schools of thought, but really three schools of thought. Tracking is unnecessary. Let's not do it. That's not going to happen. We're just not there yet, and we may not ever get there. But I understand that is one perspective that exists. The other is, hey, let's do this per plant, because that's really the way to get all the way down into the nitty gritty of all of the details. We know exactly what's in our market. We can control what's in our market. And that's really ultimately going to be the best thing for cultivators, because we know we're going to prevent anything from coming in from out of state, and therefore reducing the price of our product that we've worked hard to grow, a high quality product. The other school of thought is, hey, let's just do this by batch. And let's just say a batch is 20 plants. So you're going to have one QR code for 20 plants. You scan the QR code, and then you start to create these averages. And it won't be as precise, obviously, as doing per plant tracking in year one, but year after year, you will start to get the data, and you'll see the consistency or the lack of consistency in the data, and it will be as precise. So it's really a question of,
it's like doing an approximation model, sort of.
Exactly. And I think that, for most farmers, they would much prefer to do batch for ease of mind and ease of effort.
I think you're right about that, Todd.
So I think, that's where I think our benefit really comes into play, because we've been designed to be able to satisfy that desire for farmers and for regulators to still get the information that they need.
Now, these RFID tags, do you know where they're manufactured, or are they recyclable, or any of that shit?
I don't know that. For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Not sure about that.
Curious. I was wondering. Now, Todd, you said you've sort of priced this model out for different tiers of growers, and like I said, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have any kind of ballpark figures that you could throw out for people who might be listening, I'd be super curious to hear what kind of expense we might be looking at.
Yeah, so I think what we've really tried to do is, as a Vermont company, we've tried to meet Vermonters' needs and try to price the product in a way that is it's one price. We don't charge you extra for users, and we don't charge you extra for equipment or RFID tags. It's just one monthly price. Have as many people as you like. The other piece of that is that we've offered, this is the price that we'll use going forward, but year one is going to be discounted by 15%, recognizing that folks are just getting up and operating, right? Like, they've got all this money going out, they don't have any money coming in. And so we're trying to keep it as low as possible in year one, knowing that it'll go up in year two. And as you said, we did price everything by tier, with the kind of anticipating that obviously this is the size of your crop, it's going to be smaller.
Sure.
It's going to be smaller. So tier one is $350 a month. And it goes up from there to $450 for tier two, $600 for tier three, $850 for tier four, tier five is $1,250. And then you take 15% off that price per month.
What about the mixed licenses? Have you
so
worked that out?
Yeah, the mixed licenses are the same price, but then we add a 10% additional fee for the outdoor grow. So gotcha. We felt like, we looked at tier one, right? And we said, okay, that's $350 if you're doing tier one per month. If you're doing a mixed cultivation license, an extra $35 for that outdoor grow seems like a reasonable thing. And pardon me 1 second, this is the dog I need to take care of.
Yeah, get him. That's all right, buddy.
Sorry
Take
about
care.
that.
Yeah.
You're so obnoxious. Get inside.
Your sound's still on, Todd.
That's all right. He's a 140-pound baby who, whenever he gets left alone for too long, starts to cry, and that's what he was doing. He's barking and crying.
That sounds like me. I'm like 180 though.
Yeah.
So you said after it sort of goes through the growing phase, the manufacturers and the retailers really aren't going to be. It's kind of out of your hands at that point. Was I hearing that right?
For the retailers, most likely, yes. For the manufacturers, no. Okay. So one of the challenges that we have is that until we actually see what those tracking regs are going to be, we don't know how onerous it's going to be for manufacturers. We don't know how onerous it's going to be for
the state hasn't locked those in yet.
They haven't locked them in yet. What I'm being told is that they they have an idea. They're pretty clear on what they're going to do, but they haven't made it public yet because I don't think they've dotted every I and crossed every T. We're hoping that they'll be out this week. I think, for us, and I think for everybody, the certainty is better. It's easier, right? So I think, from a business perspective for us, I think we probably have lost an opportunity to get a few clients because they have felt like, I can't wait for the state anymore. I just need to do something. I'm going to do it on my own. That may change and create some confusion in the marketplace. Pardon me. But, this lack of clarity right now is a little bit hard for us to work through, especially when we talk about the manufacturers and we talk about extraction or labs. Labs seems pretty clear. Like, they're not going to need our service. They're going to just do a report and then it's going to get uploaded to our service. But that will really be about the cultivator, right? That's the cultivator's flower that's getting tested. It's their test results. We'll just keep that in our tracking records, and then we'll upload that to the state, and then obviously create a QR code for packaging that will allow consumers to scan that QR code and see what the lab results are. And pardon me, sorry, the second dog now needs to come in. I'll be. Come on.
That looks like a nice bike, Todd.
What's that?
That looks like a nice bike.
Yeah.
Are you a biker?
Yeah, big mountain biker. Yeah.
Do you think that the state is equipped to handle all the data that's gonna be coming at them? Because as someone who's lived in Vermont my whole life, I gotta say they don't seem particularly well versed at building out websites or the like network infrastructure or things of that nature, or handling massive influxes of data coming at them.
Yeah, it's a question that we have gotten quite a bit, and I think that the beauty of the system that the Vermont regulators are setting up, that the CCB has really considered and thought hard about, was creating a very simple database. And I think that in part it should be so simple that the real question is, are we performing? Are the other track and trace platforms performing? And so, I think that the state has a long history of tech failures and successes. The problem is we don't talk about successes nearly as much as we do the failures.
That's true. I'll give you that. Yep.
That said, I think that right now, what is at least conceptually being designed is going to be a fairly straightforward database that we will establish an API with and upload the data automatically into that database. And so it should really be quite simple. So I have a lot of faith that this system is going to work well. At least from our perspective, we feel confident that we can make it work well.
So you're prepared to handle the influx of data?
We are, absolutely. Yeah, I should send you the link to our site. You can get in there, set up an account. I can, if you want to post it here, we don't care. We're opening it up to everybody to say, hey, go create an account, poke around, start to learn the system, because what our concern is that the regs are going to come out and then there's going to be this mad rush, like, oh, now the regs are out, I got to do something. And we're trying to get people set up, not paying. They don't have to pay us yet. We're just trying to get them set up now, start to learn the system, because we're a small company. And if we have, 50 people that all need to be onboarded at the same time, that's going to be really tough.
How many employees do you have, Todd?
9. Yep.
And what's your average workday like, my man? or your employees, or a general gist of like how kind of hard you guys have been working here?
Well, this is the thing about being the CEO of a startup in a small company. You're kind of, I'm probably dating myself a little bit with a Bugs Bunny reference, but there's a Bugs Bunny cartoon where it's like Bugs Bunny first base, Bugs Bunny second base, Bugs Bunny.
I love Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, so I'm Bugs Bunny, and my day is really a little bit of everything, right? So our CTO is hard at work managing the dev team, which is the majority of our employees. We don't have a sales staff. I do the sales. I oversee all of the staff.
You do some events, I see.
I'm sorry?
You do some events. I see you tabling at Zen Barn. Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to the events. I'm attending as many things as I possibly can attend, trying to put my public relations and government affairs background to work to make sure those things are in order for our company, that we're in a good place to secure contracts should they become available, but also just communicate with government officials who I think we all know are going to take a look at this program again next legislative session and probably make some changes. And we need to make sure those changes don't hurt us.
Have you gone to provide any testimony in the legislative sessions?
So I testified early on in the process when I was representing Trace as their lobbyist. But generally speaking, we've stayed out of most of the legislative work and out of the regulatory work. So in my experience with government, right, we're not touching product, right? So we want to help all the farmers, and not all the farmers necessarily see the way that the program should go in the same way. So to be diplomatic, we just say, hey, we're going to stay out of that because we're not farmers. So we're not experts in farming. And we just want to be here to help you. We support the program. We want to get it passed, but we tend not to dive into the details because no matter what we do or say, we're either going to make someone happy or make them unhappy. And it's just better off for us just to kind of be on the sidelines on anything but the tracking policies.
You got any growers working for you, Todd?
No growers now. Chris, who is our CTO, is a farmer, but not a cannabis farmer.
Yeah, you don't need growers to make software. But
it is one of the reasons that we've actually given out the link to go ahead and sign up for an account, is because our software has been developed with grower input from the get-go.
Good.
But now we're in the real world, right? Like, this is the Vermont real world. And unfortunately, what we've seen in all the states is the programs are slightly different enough that it kind of changes what a cultivator might want from the product and what they need from the product. And so,
or how to implement your software.
Exactly. And, we feel like we've created a really intuitive system that allows people to kind of work through the problems that they're going to have. One of the things that people often don't realize is that track and trace solutions are fairly rigid, or need to be fairly rigid, because they're a regulatory tool, and you can't kind of mess up the system, if you will, right? Like, you have to start in a certain place and you have to end in a certain place, and you have to hit certain stops along the path. Now, there are a few that you don't have to do that you might want to choose to do, like extraction, for instance. If you're making an edible, some people might just do all flower and they don't have that stop. But there are going to be the 8 to 10 stops that everyone has to do. And so you have to make that system rigid, but also flexible in the sense that it's easy for people to use. And that's a real trick, and not the easiest thing to accomplish, to be able to meet both of those demands that are happening simultaneously and really are in contradiction with one another.
That's a great point, Todd. I wanted to ask you this. Do you know if the medical dispensaries will be sort of beholden to the same track and trace rules as sort of everyone else? Or you said once it gets to a dispensary, it's sort of out of your hands. So are they going to be required to track and trace their products at the medical dispensaries, or do you even know that?
I don't think at the dispensaries they will. I think that it really is it depends on which policy the state ultimately implements. Like, if you're at the medical dispensary, if you're receiving product from the same cultivation operation that is providing product to the rec dispensaries, you're going to have to track it the same way, because it's all going to be product coming from the same greenhouse, grow area, outdoor, whatever the case may be, whatever individuals are choosing to grow their products. So yes, they'll be beholden to some track and trace regulations, but I don't think there'll be as many. I'm not sure, this is a really open-ended question, not one I'm expert in or paying close attention to.
That's why I ask them like that, Todd.
Yeah, but it seems to me that the future of the medical program is very much up in the air, and how that will be managed, and just how that's going to go forward. And I think that is the bigger question that will dictate kind of what all that looks like.
Another great point. So let me ask you this. I had a couple questions about like banking. Like, are you guys subject to any of these banking fees that other cannabis companies are going to be subject to?
We're not, but we do have a lot of similar problems in the financial world that a cultivator or somebody that's actually touching product has. So, for instance, we've had a really difficult time with numerous providers for payment processing. right? So on our site, we want to
Really?
make it as easy as possible for our users to go ahead and pay their monthly subscription fees. And we've been gone through the process for months with certain providers who remain nameless and then rejected us because they called us a quote unquote cannabis company. So we're not, on the pain scale, the 10 that, the actual cultivators and everybody are feeling. We're not there, but we're not a 1 either. We kind of fall somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. We have a really good relationship with VSCCU, have from the beginning. They've been wonderful. I can't say enough about good things about them as a financial institution providing services. For full disclosure, I was on the board there for 6 years. So
No shit.
I am biased, but yeah, I think if you ask anybody that served with me on the board and the CEOs at the time, I saw the transition from Steve Post to Rob Miller. They will tell you that I was a real pain in the ass on advocating for cannabis accounts getting up and going. And this one, we were just talking about hemp.
Well, I want to thank you for disclosing that, Todd, because I feel like a lot of people might not have disclosed that. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no secrets here. Yeah, no, but I continue to be a huge fan. I mean, I haven't been on the board for 4 or 5 years, probably longer than that. Time flies. But I just think they've done a tremendous job, specifically in this arena, of being appropriately aggressive to get out there and allow these accounts to be opened. Given what the environment is, that's not an easy thing to do. Trust me, you talk about regulations in the cannabis industry, they pale in comparison to what those guys go through on a daily basis and making sure those I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And I know other financial institutions will get into this space as it grows and people get more comfortable. But if anybody out there listening to it is up in the air about which one to go with or where to open an account, I cannot say enough good things. Do it there. They're in the process of a merger, but
yeah. Do you have any comments on the merger?
well, I submitted an op-ed that I think ran in VT Digger and the Rutland Herald and Times Argus, supportive of the merger. Everything that I know about what's happening externally and internally as far as how they'll operate, all is incredibly positive. New England Federal Credit Union, which does not currently serve the cannabis industry, I don't believe, in Vermont.
I think they do. I have a
Do they
price
now?
structure from them. Yeah.
Oh,
I can
awesome.
show you that later. And I believe
Well,
Vermont Federal Credit Union has also entered the game here as player 3.
Yep. And one of the questions that I asked before I submitted my op-ed, which I was only asked to do that because I'm a former board member, and but was like, what's the future of cannabis banking for the credit union in this merger?
A lot of people do want to know that answer.
Yeah, and if I didn't get a positive response, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have supported the merger because I think it was important that the VSECU culture and approach to cannabis continued, and that's the one that dominated through the merger. With every merger of 2 companies, some culture from one company stays and the other one stays.
Right. And that's what everyone's wondering. Are we going to take the 1.5% flat fee from VSECU, or are we going to see the tiered structure from NEFCU after the merger is, I believe, which they said was early next year, maybe.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Yeah, well, nobody knows.
Yeah, they don't give me that much inside information.
Yeah, no.
Where it's going. But I do think I would definitely do it. And look, I mean, I think you've seen the other credit unions come on board, and that is it really is props to VSCCU for being the leader there. And they're the ones that kind of broke the ground. They took the risks. They opened the door, and so now others will follow. And it's important that others follow. This is not to say they shouldn't do it. I think they should.
Do you think we're going to see any commercial banks sort of moving into that space?
I think we might see some of the smaller Vermont commercial banks move into that space. But
I see Brattleboro Savings and Loan was talking about it. They had a guy on the marijuana commission or whatever. And
there's going to be so I think, I digress, but like this gets into the whole question about, federal legislation and, safe banking and federal legalization. And I hear a lot of people in Vermont because Chuck Schumer introduced his federal legalization bill where, we're close now, it's going to happen. Like, I can't say enough. People should not think federal legalization is going to happen. It's not happening anytime soon. I don't think it'll happen in Biden's first term, and if Biden is reelected, I don't think it'll happen in Biden's second.
And do you think that would make your job insanely harder if now weed can cross internet or state lines? We could send it all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective right now, the best thing that could possibly happen for us, and that could possibly happen for small cultivators in Vermont and small cultivators around the country, is that federal legalization not happen for 3 to 5 years. Like I hands down do not think anybody should be rooting for that if you're rooting for the little guy. We aren't there yet. We haven't solidified our place in this industry. We need to solidify our market. We need to have people better understand that the small brands can survive and they actually provide you a better product. But we need to make that case to consumers, because no matter what, consumers are still price conscious. And so if we're going to be a little bit more expensive, we have to be better, and we have to tell that story effectively. And I don't think it's different for us. We have the state of Vermont contract for the hemp program, and we're getting more and more commercial clients every day. But we aren't established in that way. And I think federal legalization would probably really put us in a bind in continuing our growth trajectory.
Boy, I thought we were going to have a disagreement there, and then you went the other way, and I was like, oh, Todd, yes.
No.
I also think that. I think as soon as they go federally legal, they're going to be shipping in pounds from California for $400, dude. And like,
yeah,
you can't pass up like a $5 eighth at the store.
Yeah.
Like,
you can't. You can't. And but I do think the trends nationally are going to be about higher quality and brands. And
I hope so.
I think we need to. This is one of the areas that we hope we can help, because one of the nice things about our technology, it's not like it's earth-shattering new technology. I mean, QR codes, we know QR codes, like they're around. But what they allow us to do in our tracking system is not only the testing results, but to create a marketing pitch embedded in that QR code, right? So I think what we'll see is the more sophisticated businesses utilizing other aspects of the QR code on their packaging to not just provide what the lab results are, but a story about their farm, a story about their cultivation operation, photos, whatever the case may be. Like, what are the other variables that you can use to sell your product to the consumer and have them understand that you want this, you don't want mega this. And that will just take some time, but I think creating brands in Vermont that tell that story well, and then creating relationships with cultivators out of state, but that are growing the same product and selling it as the same brand, to be prepared for federal legalization so these smaller operations can take advantage of it. That's where I think we can actually play a role as the track and trace platform for people. But that's 15 or 20% of the overall effort that really is about the cultivator and their vision and their goals and how they go about achieving those things.
Fucking another great point, Todd. I've never told anyone named Todd they've made this many good points in a 1 hour span. Damn.
I appreciate it.
I want to ask you, this is the last thing that I have on my list, is about liability, really. Are you guys going to be liable for any of the products that you're tracing? Or I assume like most of that's probably been tested, right? So how does that work? Do you know?
Yeah, so we do have liability, but not with the actual product, right? So I assume for testing, the liability is on the lab. If they provide a bad test, that's on them.
Sure.
And for us, if we provide bad data, if we somehow screw up the data, that can be on us.
Oh,
and
I got you.
There would be recourse that individuals could take if we screw up the data. But ultimately, that responsibility is all going to fall on the people producing the product, whether that be the final product, the flower, whatever it is. But it is one of the things that we are very conscious about and careful about, is that we need to be mindful of all of that data that's there, and that it's being handled properly, that it is safe and it is secure. Because if there is a problem, we need to be able to point back to say, this is where the problem originated. This is how it started, because it's also going to defend the cultivator in some instances, right? So that they can say, I didn't do this.
And if you can't point back to where the problem came from, maybe your whole concept of your business is failing. So it seems like you should be able to do that if you're the track and trace guy.
Exactly. And that's the service that we provide and the security we provide. Look, I get why people, cultivators are saying to us, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm just going to do it in a spreadsheet. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like, I get it. Like,
Oh,
I understand.
you've talked to people who are planning to do that on their own.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. And it puts us in a little bit of a predicament because obviously we want to sell our product. We want as many clients as possible. There's no secrets there, right? That's obvious.
That's how business works.
Right? But then to say to someone, oh, well, are you really secure? Like, I don't want clients because I'm scaring them. I want clients because they think we can provide them the service they need to protect their business. And it is a worry, though. It is a concern that, people, you're using a spreadsheet is not secure data. Right. So you run the risk of audit and people questioning everything that you're doing. It's a real risk that people should be mindful of. This is the difference between the spreadsheet and a tracking system. You cannot alter the data. The data you put in is the data. That is it, period. And so once you do that, once you put the data in, we can delete it. We can alter it, but you can't. You cannot do anything. So it is a process to fix things that's going to need to be verified in numerous ways that the edit or the deletion is warranted. And when you do it in a spreadsheet, that's just not the case. Anybody can go in there and change a 0 to a 6 or
is there any cases where editing or deleting data would be warranted?
None that come to mind. I think the only place that I could say that might happen is in where we are right now, which is the very early stage. And I know people are excited and they want to start putting data into the system so that they can get that part done of their grow operation. This is the rub of, people started growing before they technically had their license. And the regulators are saying, we know you're growing and you technically don't have your license, but it's okay this year. Like we prefer that everybody waited to the license. We understand the realities. We understand people aren't doing that. And so grow operations are being put in this position of like, do I actually track from the beginning? Because that's going to tell you that I put plants in the ground before I had my license. Right. So we're not going to edit that. I'm going to be perfectly clear. Like we are not.
And I thought they should have allowed some leeway this year. And
they did. And so this is the regulators. And so what we've been advising people to do, with the caveat, obviously, of we are not your lawyers, we are not, liable for any of this, is that they want you to track. You should track. You should trust them, but you should do what they're asking you to do from this point forward.
But most of the people I've met are trying to stay above board as much as possible. They want to do it the right way.
And this is why they're asking, is because they want to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And the question, the real question is like, well, if I put this data in that way, what happens? And then it's like, well, I can't tell you what happens, but I can tell you that follow the rules and I think you'll be fine. Can't guarantee it, but they've said it themselves. I trust these regulators. I trust these people. I don't think they're going around telling people, oh, no, just go do it. And then they're going to regulators going to run around and fine you or shut you down. It's not going to happen. I think people are going to be mindful of this.
Well, I also don't think they have enough regulators to run around tracking people down all day, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well, that is certainly true. You never know what law enforcement is bored one day, and
So Todd, I got one more question here. I want to ask you, who did your logo?
Oh my gosh, you would ask that.
Got him. Yes.
Shoot.
Okay. We can follow up on this.
They did it 3 or 4 years. They were really early on. I did not work with them directly.
Okay.
Bridled. I will have to look that up, man. Okay. I will post it on your.
That's nice. It gets the point across really nicely.
I think they did a fantastic job, and I'm really bummed that I'm not giving them a shout out right now because I cannot remember their name. It's been so long. But they did a really great job. Our brand book, I think, is phenomenal, and the stuff they created for us is great. They're right in Burlington. We used local, we used the local Vermont company. They're really excellent.
Todd, did you used to lift weights or play football or something?
I never really played football. I played basketball.
Okay.
Never played football.
Look, I'm out of questions. I always like to leave the last word for my guests. So that's all I got, man. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'm going to leave the last word for you here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's been good to talk and hopefully get this information out to folks across the state. And look, if folks want to learn more about us, reach out to me directly, Todd, 2Ds at tracevt.com. Send me an email anytime. You can find us at Trace.cannabis on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Trace is on Twitter. Todd, or it's Trace CEO for Twitter. And yeah, so I will send you the link though to our working site. We're asking people, set up an account, poke around, get going, and no charge until you're growing.
Well, I'm not a grower. I'm just a customer, really, Todd. But I'd fuck around with your software and see how it goes.
Yeah, no, we'd love it, man. We'd love the feedback.
Cool.
But other than that, we're plugging along like everyone else, man. It's Vermont summer is running out, and the pressure's on. So we gotta get everybody on board here as fast as possible, because we really would like to serve as many Vermont businesses as possible.
We're up. That seems like a great note to leave it on. Todd Bailey, Trace Vermont, thanks again for your time, man. This has been a pleasure, and it was really nice meeting you the other day, and I wish you guys the best of luck.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks, Caleb. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, that was beautiful, Todd. I'm going to cut out of here, but thank you so much.